everyone who has joined us this morning, or I should say this afternoon, for your lunch. Kelly Caseman, Executive Director of Think Kids, and with me are Dr. Kelli Williams and Maggie Smart with Marshall University's Department of Dietetics and Food Pantry. And we have a lot of ground to cover in the next hour. So before we jump in, I want to let you know that at any time, you're welcome to write any comments or questions you have for our guests in the comments section. And we'll take a few breaks from the dialogue to respond. And I'd really like to thank Andrea Dart with the Handle of Care program for joining us today and keeping an eye on our Facebook page. So let's kick off the conversation by giving our panelists a chance to introduce themselves and share what they do and why the issue of food insecurity and access to healthy foods are important to them. So let's begin with Dr. Kelli Williams.
So hi there, I'm Kelli Williams, and I am chair of the Department of Dietetics at Marshall. I have served in this role for 20-something years, and I have a real interest. A lot of my research interests and just personal interests are in community nutrition, health promotion, disease prevention, and through that, I think I really developed an interest for hunger and food insecurity. I have served on the board of Facing Hunger Food Bank. I served as the chair of that board for a number of years because it became then, as part of all of that, sort of a passion for me. And so it was kind of a no-brainer when the department was asked to think about the possibility of reopening a food pantry on Marshall's campus, that we would want to do that in the Department of Dietetics so that we could not only offer food, but we could offer some nutritious, nutrient-dense food and some nutrition education for the people who need it in our area. So that's kind of my interest, and my affiliation with the pantry is just that I sort of am the liaison with the department and between the department and our pantry, and just work with Maggie and then our current pantry manager to make sure we're all kind of where we need to be and getting the things that we need.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Kelli. Maggie?
So I'm Maggie Smart. I just graduated from Marshall's undergraduate dietetics program. I'm the former student pantry manager. I got the role kind of not accidentally, but kind of. My first semester with my nutrition courses, I went to my advisor and asked what I could do to get more involved in the nutrition field. And just by chance, she's like, well, actually the current student director at that time, he was getting ready to graduate in the following year. So there needed to be somebody else to take over. So I started volunteering. I wrote recipes, and then eventually was in the pantry helping. And then I took over that role. So it was just kind of coincidentally that I got this position, but I've learned so much through it. And I do sit on the board of the Facing Hunger Food Bank now. So I get a lot of different views on food insecurity through the community as well as college campuses.
Great, thank you, Maggie. And you're in Colorado right now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us for your morning this morning. And I just want to say, so there are 2 food banks in the state. So just kind of this precursor information, we have 2 really great food banks. We have Mountaineer Food Bank, we have Facing Hunger Food Bank, and Facing Hunger, I believe, I want to say 13 counties, and then in West Virginia, and then it's also in Ohio and Kentucky.
Yeah, right? There's a few counties in Ohio, and I think like 1 in Kentucky.
Okay, great. Thank you both for joining us. Let me jump into the first question we have prepared for you. In April 2018, Wisconsin's Hope Lab of 66 institutions across 20 states explored how food insecurity has become pervasive on college and university campuses across the country. The study found that 36% of students were food insecure, 36%, which really surprised me. Would you consider that accurate? And what does food insecurity look like on the campus of Marshall University?
So Maggie, I'll tackle this first, and then you can tag on if you want. I think that almost all the literature that's out there is pretty consistent with what you just stated as far as hunger goes on college campuses and just students being food insecure. I would say, at least with my experiences, that's probably also pretty consistent with Marshall and what's going on here. It's not a lot different than a lot of other college campuses around the country. We don't have any data about that right now. I'll tell you that when we first looked at reopening the pantry several years ago, prior to Maggie, we did a little investigation about that, and we found that it looked pretty consistent with the rest of the country. People were food insecure and on college campuses, and they were at Marshall, and they didn't really know how to access the food. Number one, potentially, but number two, the other thing that we found that was a big part of this is that there were some issues about just feeling uncomfortable, even if the food was accessible to them. So when we tried to think about reopening the pantry, we really talked to students to find out, how can we do this in a way that you're going to be comfortable receiving the food, and we can do it in a way that is non-threatening. It doesn't make you feel strange that you need assistance. And so we really tried to work out some of those kinks and find people to work for us like Maggie, who are just super good at making that all happen and people feel comfortable and get the food. So I would say, yes, I think I took a circuitous route around to that answer, but I think it's probably pretty consistent with that data in that study.
Yeah, I would agree. Out of the patrons that do come to the pantry, we service the community as well as students. And in 2020, we had about 47% of people coming as students. So I think that's a good number since we are on campus. But I feel a lot of students don't know that the pantry exists. So I think if it were out there more, which we've been trying to do, it's challenging because you don't want to be like, hey, do you need food? And kind of like out somebody. But I think that the number would be a lot higher if we were able to get it out there. Because the pantry is in a great location, but sometimes I think it's a little bit too discreet because not as many people know where it is. Even though we have signs and banners and stuff, I just don't think that as many students know that it's there. So I think that the number would be a little bit higher if more students knew about it.
You know, I would have to say it was probably last year when we started. It was the second year of the Health and Hunger Project. And we focused on a regional area near Marshall University, but it was through that work that I talked with someone from the West Virginia Higher Ed Commission who said, do you know food insecurity is identified as a priority from student governments across the state? And it never dawned on me that it would be such a pervasive problem. And so, you know, it's wonderful to see people like Maggie while they're going through school to want to work on it and find meaningful ways to address it. I can imagine that stigma probably is one of the reasons that people wouldn't access it. How did you come to recognize that the university needed to respond to the need of food insecurity on campus?
Well, I think we, and I sort of addressed that a little bit before, I think we just started putting some feelers out and recognizing that there was a need, and some of that was kind of brought to our attention by other people on campus who said, I think we had a food pantry for a while, and then it shut down for a bit, and so there was this, and I can't remember the exact study, someone on campus, and I should have pulled that up, did a little study and looked at and showed that there was food insecurity on campus. And so then that kind of started a dialogue among administration on campus and chairs, and it just sort of made sense, a sort of a dialogue in our Department of Health Professions that we are in our College of Health Professions that our department's in, that we would be sort of the natural people who might be able to help figure that out. And at the time, I had just stepped down from the Facing Hunger Board, so I had those connections and I knew those people, and so that was when we decided we should really plug into Facing Hunger. We should plug into the opportunities that are available there, and let's start something on campus. But we also didn't want to ignore the need of just the community at large. And so it was really important to us when we made this decision that we could do a pantry that we were just open to anybody. And you can just come in and say you have a need and we'll fill it, because for students, that was sort of one of the areas that was problematic. If we needed you to show proof of income or need or whatever, that got muddy the waters a lot. And students weren't interested in that and they didn't want to do that. So we were pretty set from the beginning of like, we can't do that. We just, if you say you're hungry, you walk in our door, we're going to give you food. And so, you know, we just started recognizing a need. And I think it wasn't just us, it was lots of different areas on campus, but it just sort of in the discussion fell to us as we're the people who make sense to help with this and try to combat this problem on campus.
Thanks. Maggie, you have anything to add to that?
Just, you mentioned student governments, how they noticed there was an issue as well. My first year in this role, I worked closely with the president, the student government president of Marshall, and we made sure that there was an Amazon page so alumni could go on, they would order food and it would be shipped directly to the university. And then they would give it to, they would like, it would make its way to us pretty much. And if we didn't have enough storage for it, then student government would make sure that they had a set place for storage in their facility. But I think with that role, it really helped because it got the word out more than just people on campus, but if alumni wanted to donate or get more involved, then they were more than welcome to.
That's great. My question is, and I'm not sure if there's information around this. Do you know how many campuses or universities have food pantries in the state? Does anyone?
I know WVU does. I don't know how large it is, and Mount West also does. Because I've talked to a couple of people that donate to there as well. But yeah, I don't know about anywhere else.
I don't know of others either.
Yeah,
and they might exist, certainly, but I don't know them.
Right. Yeah. I think that if we keep pulling this thread and trying to, kind of grapple with this, that would be wonderful information to have, because you already knew, Kelli, you were on the board, right? So you knew that connecting with the food bank was really important. Maggie connected with student government. I mean, these seem like, intuitive things to do, but if you have no idea what's going on, if you have the wherewithal to know what steps to take. So I think that would be great information, and see if we can find that out and share it with you at a later date. Andrea, do you have any questions or comments online?
Not at this time, Kelli.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to take a video tour of the food pantry that you all helped set up and work at. Is there anything you'd like to share to preface the video before we watch it? No?
I don't think so.
Okay, let's say a little prayer that I can get this to work correctly. Can you see it? Is it up?
It is. It's up, Kelli.
Chair of the Dietetics Department at Marshall University, and we're here today in front of Marshall's Food Pantry, which is operated by the Department of Dietetics, to just show you around a little bit and tell you a little bit about what we do. And I want to introduce you to Maggie, who will tell you a little bit about herself and what we have planned for today.
Hi, I am Maggie Smart, and I am the food pantry manager here at the Marshall University Food Pantry. I am also a graduate of Marshall University's Dietetics program. And we're here today just to talk to you about food and on Marshall's campus and college campuses in general, as well as give you a little bit of a tour and what we do here at the food pantry.
So in the Dietetics Department at Marshall, we have been concerned for quite some time about food insecurity in college campuses. The data suggests that food insecurity among college students has really grown in recent years, and so we really wanted to be part of that solution. And so about 4 years ago, we teamed up with various entities on campus to try to reopen a food pantry to serve Marshall students and the community at large. Previously, there have been a pantry at Marshall, and it was located kind of in the heart of campus, and that was successful for quite some time. And then that had to close due to some unforeseen circumstances. And so when we were about to start this pantry again, we did a little searching and trying to decide how that would look and where that would be located. And what we found from many of the students that we spoke to is that they would like something that was easily accessible, but something that wasn't right in the middle of campus, that was uncomfortable and was hard to maintain confidentiality if they were hungry and they needed food. And so we worked with some places in the community, Facing Hunger Food Bank, and the university to secure a spot that is just adjacent to campus, so it will be easy for students to have access to and get to, but it also provided them some anonymity if they needed food. And so that's kind of how we arrived at where we are in our current location, and we're able to meet the needs of the students. It seems to have worked very, very well, and we just hope to be able to encourage more students. Like I said, we are open to the community and to students, faculty, staff, really anyone who has a need, and we just hope to meet that need by giving them the food that they need, but also to provide them with some nutrition education and some healthier alternatives. And so that's kind of part of our mission, being the Department of Dietetics.
As a food pantry that does want to focus on students, as we are affiliated with Marshall University, we want to give healthier options to students. So instead of just giving out ramen or high sugar cereals or sodas, we want to give them healthy foods. So again, peanut butter, lower sugar cereal, whole grain tortillas, whole grain pasta, even just the canned meat that we use. We want to highlight why we have that and how they can use that as a healthier alternative, because it is important for students to understand how their food impacts their life in general. And I know that living on campus sometimes can be hard to find the healthier options. So we want to give students that live on campus or off campus multiple options for them to have. And that is one of the missions of our food pantry, is to offer healthier options for anybody that comes here, because we know that living on a budget is hard, one, and buying healthier foods can sometimes be even harder. So we want to have those options and make it available to anybody that comes here. Okay, so now I'd like to cover the statistics of working at the food pantry and the different people that we get to see. So in order to do this, I wanted to look at different years. So for September of 2020, we had 233 people utilize the food pantry, and out of those people, 37% of them were actually students. But if you fast forward to September of 2021, we only had 111 people utilize the pantry, but 42% of them were students. So it is nice to look at the percentage of students versus community members to know that we are still making an impact in people's lives, even if we aren't serving the amount of people that we have been in the past. COVID has been a little bit challenging for us as a food pantry because people are finding different resources to get food. So we're getting more food from the USDA, but having less people come to our food pantry to get food. So we found that super challenging, as we have a lot of food here on premises, and each month we do get different foods in from the USDA. So it's very challenging as we're trying to navigate this time and transition between pre-pandemic to pandemic, as we're still in it, and hopefully post-pandemic. So from the USDA, we do get certain foods every month. Like for example, the past few months we have been getting a lot of canned beef and canned pork, which is great. And we have also been getting whole grain noodles. So we have spaghetti, elbow, and we did get macaroni and cheese, which was a little bit different than what we normally would get. So that it is nice to have different options, but there are some foods that we haven't really been getting, like peanut butter, for example. So instead of always having that as a USDA food, we haven't gotten peanut butter probably in close to a year. So we've been relying on donations from different organizations on campus to have that as a stock item, because a lot of people find peanut butter as a staple. I know that I do in my house. It's easy to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch with a little bit of fruit, which is great for college students. So we do want to try to focus on college students and helping them get food as well as knowing what to do with the food. So each month we try to give out recipes highlighting a different food each month. So for example, we've had split peas, and we continue to get split peas every month, which is really challenging because a lot of people here don't know what to do with them, community or students. So we've made it a little bit of a challenge for ourselves to figure out what to use those chickpeas in. I know last year I did a recipe with chickpeas hidden in meatballs, and we've also highlighted a split pea salad instead of just having a split pea soup. So it is nice to give out those recipes so that students and community members have options, so they're not just given something and they're just stuck with it. So each family that comes here gets different foods based off of the size. So here we have an example of what we would give for a 1 to 2 size family, or like person family. So we have 3 cans of vegetables, 2 cans of soup, 2 cans of fruits, and then we have 3 options of beans. We have the black beans, chickpeas, and split peas, as well as a bag of nuts. We have the hazelnuts, and we have the mac and cheese, a pound of spaghetti, and then we also have the beef stew and the chicken breast. So we have different options of canned meat, especially. We do have different options of like corn or green beans soups, but one thing that we do have a lot of is canned meats. So we have the beef stew and chicken, as well as canned pork and canned beef. If people don't eat pork or would rather have beef, we make sure to give them beef instead. The chicken is easier, it's in a smaller packet, so it's better for a 1 person rather than giving them a big like 2-pound can of pork, and then sometimes you don't know what to do with it. And then if by chance we do have vegetarians, we do have canned salmon, which is a great source of protein for those individuals. For vegans, we do like to highlight the beans, and we try our best to accommodate for vegans in any way possible, just so that they do have an option here at the pantry. And here are our recipe cards that I mentioned earlier. So we have the split pea salad that I mentioned, and we do give some fun facts about the item that we offer, as well as our hours and a picture. Another option that we give is recipe cards. So here's one that highlights 4 different recipes. Sometimes we give out individual cards instead of having them on one sheet. For this particular project, we did give them every item that was on here so that they had the resources to make each recipe.
Here's just a quick sheet that has our Instagram and our website. On both platforms, you can find our hours that we're open, contact information, and ways that you can donate. I hope that this video gave a better insight on food insecurity on campuses and how the Marshall Food Pantry operates. Thank you.
That was great. That was great. Can we give credit? Did you have some folks help you with that video? Was it just you two?
Maggie did it all. I didn't really do anything. Well, our current pantry manager, the one who took over after Maggie graduated, she did a lot of the filming for us, but Maggie did all the editing and whatnot. So kudos to Maggie. I didn't really do much.
Great job, Maggie.
Thank you.
That was really helpful. I have a couple of questions, but I'll stick to script and then for this question, then move on, because I'm thinking, we had this Health and Hunger Summit series last year, and we talked with 3 different counties, and many of the people who utilized their services were senior citizens. And so they have very different ways that they probably prepare meals than college students do. So, but let's put the push the pause button on that for a minute. The pantry is an important asset on campus that addresses food insecurity and the importance of good nutrition. Let's take advantage of your expertise for a minute and discuss the importance of eating well and your well-being. I'm sure it doesn't just make you a better student, but it also affects your mental health, which is really something that's in the news right now about, the need to, focus more on our self-care during the pandemic.
You want to go first, Maggie, and I'll chime in, or?
I'll follow you. You go for it.
Well, I think obviously nutrition is important, and obviously we're going to feel that way, but for lots of reasons. There's tons of data to support that eating a nutrient dense, healthy diet will help with lots and lots of things. So the things we typically think about, like chronic disease or weight management, some of those kinds of things, but also like you're talking about, it improves your ability to perform better in the classroom. It helps with rest. It helps with your ability to do physical activity or even just your activities of daily living. So there's lots of benefits even beyond what we typically think of when we think of consuming a diet that is nutrient dense, as opposed to some of the things that especially college students might typically consume, which might be foods that are highly processed with lots of sodium and added fat, and they're quick. And so what we try to do as part of the pantry is really just to introduce to them, we could give you some options. We can give you some options that are still quick. They're foods that you might like, but they're also nutrient dense, and try to teach them how to incorporate that into their diet so that they'll feel better and they'll do, they'll have better outcomes, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And also, a lot of people that come to the pantry want fresh fruits and vegetables for the for consumption. So for a while we were getting fruits and vegetables from the food bank. So on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Kroger, Walmart, and Sam's have partnered with the food bank to donate foods that they wouldn't necessarily sell. It might be an apple with a bruise on it, and it's not acceptable for them to sell anymore. So they donate it, and we get it at a very cheap price. So I was going once a week to get it. With COVID, we did see that our numbers were down, so it was hard to continually have fresh produce, which was hard for me to not be able to get all the time, but we would get it, and then we might have 3 people come that week, and then all of it would go bad, because most of the food was already on the mend of being not the best. So having it for a long period of time obviously wouldn't have been sustainable for us. But I think that making sure that students understand the importance of healthy foods in their diets is also a highlight of the food pantry. So making sure that you eat a lot of like antioxidants, that way you're not getting sick as much, which relieves stress so that you're not missing class. It's a tiered thing, I think. It's not just like a straight answer of yes, eat your fruits and vegetables. It's helping you not get sick, give you the energy to do your homework, and just stay healthy overall.
Thanks for that. I was thinking when you were during the video, Maggie, when you mentioned chickpeas, the first year we did the Health and Hunger Project, we were talking to some folks from Clay County, and they were like, enough of the chickpeas. There's always chickpeas in the food pantry. And it really lends itself to the conversation of, people have historically been concerned with food pantry food, right? Because it's meant for long shelf life. And when it's meant for long shelf life, it's not always healthy. And so, they try the food banks, especially in West Virginia. I know this has been a conversation. They try and bring in more food that is healthier. And it sounds to me like Facing Hunger Food Bank is actually taking it upon themselves to ensure that they're taking produce and, healthy food options. But then you have to think, are the people who are utilizing the food bank actually going to eat it? Mm-hmm. And so do you find that challenging, trying to bring the healthy food in and whether or not it's going to be consumed?
I don't think so. I think so the Marshall Food Pantry is a little bit different than other pantries. So pre-pandemic, they would actually be able to come in and shop per se. So our foods have to be split, USDA foods in one room and donations in the other room. Most people like the donations more because it's not the same things that they would get somewhere else. It's just something different. But they would have to get the USDA foods in order to get those donations. So they would come in and shop and get exactly what they would want. So if they didn't want chickpeas, they didn't necessarily have to get chickpeas. Now, there were some instances that we did have so many chickpeas that we'd have to say, hey, you have to take 2 cans of chickpeas if you want the donated foods or like the fresh fruits and vegetables. And most people were fine with it. A lot of people do love the fresh fruits and vegetables. We did partner with the West Virginia Extension Service, and every other week we received boxes of produce from local farmers. So we would get it one week and then another food pantry would get it the next week. But it was stuff that they weren't able to sell, or they didn't sell the past week. So we would get about 15 boxes every other week. And they would have, oh gosh, so many different things: ramps, beets, zucchini, apples, potatoes, squash. And it was all great. And they would even give spices or sauces if they thought it was necessary. Like there was a lot of items for stir fry. So we received soy sauce and garlic powder, I think, that week. But a lot of people do want the healthier options because they're able to get it at the Marshall Food Pantry versus other places. So they get the option here, but maybe they walk up to another food pantry and they just get a box of food handed to them, which they might not even like. So since, like I mentioned, prior to COVID, we let everybody come in, but due to COVID, we kind of just we made everybody stay outside, which sounds a little harsh, but the area is very small, and as a student, missing class is not ideal. So we all wanted to be very aware of everybody that came into contact with each other. So we allowed people to give us their preferences. So I would go out and get their name, their information, and just make sure that they got what they wanted. So if they wanted pork instead of beef, or if they didn't want a certain thing, then they weren't stuck with it. But yes, a lot of people did want the healthier foods.
I'll just tag on to Maggie's comment, because I think our students have done a really good job, Maggie and now Clarissa, who's running it, and the students who volunteer. So COVID did derail us a little bit. And interestingly enough, our numbers dropped during COVID. Of course, some of that because students left campus and had to study from home. But even during that, there was this plethora of, I think, food available everywhere because at the time. And so we did see a drop in our numbers, but I think that we've done a good job. It was wonderful when we were able to have people shop the pantry themselves, but Maggie did a really good job putting together this little survey to get all their preferences. And so they are very accommodating. And I think that's nice because as someone who, I grew up in a family where we worked at a pantry in our church and we did stuff for people. And sometimes that's hard to come in anyway. But when you have people like Maggie who are just super accommodating and kind and want to give you what you want and need, I think that makes all the difference. So the fact that we are not just, like Maggie said, handing them a box, but we're getting, I mean, Maggie gets to know these people, and the students who work there all the time get to know these people, and they understand their preferences and they try to accommodate those. So it's a little easier to eat healthy when we're not just giving them a box of, chickpeas and whatever, dried beans that they don't even know how to maybe even fix. And so I really applaud Maggie for that, because that was kind of her idea to make sure we still were able to honor preferences and give people things they wanted.
That was a wonderful idea. Yeah, it was very intentional, which I think was really important, especially during those, the heightened first months of the pandemic when people were a little nervous about, how now I'm not working, how am I going to eat, what's going to happen next. So that was, that's great. I wonder if other food pantries on campuses across the state were as intentional. It reminds me when we did our regional health and hunger project, we talked about with West Virginia University Extension about, they put packages together and worked with the food bank, and they had a number of older folks who utilize the food pantries who really loved that, here's the recipe, here's the ingredients, let's go home and cook. Is that something that you see college students wanting to do as well, or do you have to be mindful of the fact that they usually kind of like fast and easy?
Whenever I would make the recipes, I wouldn't do anything over the top by any means. Because at the same time, I was also a college student. So when developing the recipes, I wanted to make sure that they were easy and used items that were not very expensive if they had to go buy them at the store. I know I did apricot chicken one time, and it was so hard for me to we had all these apricots and I didn't know what to do with an apricot. But I didn't want to do something sweet because it's the easiest thing to do. It would be like, oh, let's make a cookie or something. Well, that's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do. So I did do like baked apricot chicken, and it was okay. I made sure that I gave the recipe out and I explained exactly what to do. But I think that people use the recipes. I've made a lot of different recipes. Some are easier than others. Sometimes I was able to use donated money to get ingredients for those recipes. So for example, last year I did a project for one of my classes about food insecurity and nutrient deficiencies in children. And so with that, even though it's not with college students, I think that it was important to make sure that each person got all of those ingredients. So anybody that came during, I think it was like a week, anybody that came during that time, they got all those ingredients. They got frozen broccoli, ground beef, chicken, spices. I think they got some oil. I can't remember exactly, but they got all of those ingredients. And it is very susceptible for those people that come to get the recipes, because sometimes you just don't know what to do with items. So having an example, and I see that not only just college students, but also the community members that come, because Appalachia has a very, not strict, but kind of like it's pinto beans is a big thing, but they don't know what to do with a different type of bean. Or like proteins is hard. So making sure that they know exactly what to do, college students as well as community members. I hope that answered the question.
You did. I was thinking of, I also regionally, I think it's important, because I remember in Clay County, they were saying, we have people who come into the pantry who don't have electricity. And so you really have to be mindful of what you give people, knowing that they're not going to be able to use what you're giving them. So there's a lot to be mindful of. Go ahead, Maggie.
We do have some homeless individuals that come and utilize the pantry. So it's always important to make sure that we're giving them foods that they can actually prepare, instead of giving them something that they're not going to use, or it's just going to go to waste. So I always make sure to ask, when they come, they have to fill out a form just to say your income and stuff like that. For students, I don't necessarily ask that question because I feel like it's very awkward. But if they're like, I don't really have an address right now, so I would make sure that they know that coming to the food pantry, we have options available for them.
It's great. Thank you for that, Kelly. I know we're going to lose you in a minute, so I want to ask a question that you probably have more historic knowledge of. Food insecurity, is that something that you ever discuss to a greater extent on campus, like having healthy alternatives in the dining halls and extracurricular activities?
Yes, I mean, I would say, and Maggie touched on this a little bit at the beginning, talking about her involvement with student government. So student government in recent years has had a real interest in hunger, and our former president also had a real interest in hunger on campus. So we actually did a lot. And Maggie was a part of a lot of those conversations. And then the pantry manager before her, who was one of our former students, was involved in a lot of that too. Just working on campus to try to figure out how we can do things like reclaim unused food dollars for students to respend if they're food insecure. And we've talked about and worked with some Sodexo, who is our vendor on campus for food service, about some food reclaiming and being able to reutilize some of those foods. We've still been in conversations. COVID has sort of derailed some of those things, but there have been conversations happening on Marshall's campus about that. And really that's been going on for the past few years. There's been a real interest in decreasing the amount of hunger on campus. And there's been a lot of people who have shown interest, both in administration throughout the university, but also among students and student government. And so we have worked, and student government has been able to do things like be able to give dining bucks or money to students who have a need, and to be able to transfer that. And that's all stuff that's happened just in the last year or so on campus to try to assist with that more. So there is a larger dialogue on campus, and I think there are some good things happening about that, around hunger and just raising awareness and making some changes that might be helpful.
Great, thank you. Maggie, you have anything to add to that?
I would just, how Kelly mentioned, the dining dollars. So there's a meal swipe exchange program. So if you live on campus and you have a meal plan, say you have extra meal swipes, which most students do, they can donate them in a sense to, I don't know how it works. I was never on that end of it. It started after I had moved off campus. But as a student, you go online, you fill out an application, which is it just asks it pretty much, if you're a student, what your 901 number is, and that's about it. And so it asks you those questions, and then it goes under review. But I think that anybody that applies for it gets meal swipes. So then you have access to the dining halls. And I think you can apply more than once in a semester. So I've done it in the past, and I got 10 meal swipes, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in a way it is. My husband and I used it. So we would go to Harless, which is our dining hall, and we were able to eat there for dinner or lunch or something. So it did help a lot. We weren't spending as much money on groceries as what we normally would, because we had the option to go to Harless. And they do offer some healthy options. I think that sometimes it's good, but some people don't know what those foods are. I know that sometimes I've gone in there and I'm I don't even know what that is. And I would say that I'm very well versed in different types of foods. Or a lot of times it's fish, and not a lot of people like fish. So I think that there's revisions that could be made, but that's besides the fact. But there are healthier options if you're looking for them.
That's great. It's great to see that there is interaction, and I bet it's probably smart for them to give those swipes, because then if you have more people utilizing it, you don't have all that extra food that you have to throw away. Andrea, let's turn to you and see if you have any questions or comments online.
There are no questions or comments, but I had a question. I went to the website and I saw that you also have toiletries in your food bank. Do people how often do they access those toiletries?
So whenever we would make a box, I always would put a toiletry item in there. So it just depending on what we have. It's soaps, feminine hygiene products. Sometimes we get toilet paper, a smorgasbord of things, really, toothpaste, toothbrushes, and I kind of base it off of the number of people in that family. So I'm not going to give a packet of 5 toothbrushes to a family of 1, because they're not going to be utilized as well. Or a smaller item would go towards the smaller family versus a larger item I would make sure to give to a bigger family, just so that it's getting the most use. But everybody leaves with at least 1 toiletry item.
And if they had any kind of a need for specifically those things, we would certainly be willing to help them out. I'm sorry that I have to jump off now because I had something else previously scheduled that I wasn't able to really change. But if there's anything else that comes up, look me up on Marshall's website. If people have questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them. You feel free to email me. Thank you so much, Kelly, for organizing, and Maggie, thank you for finishing up for me.
No problem.
Kelly.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So in the last, I think we have around 15 minutes left. Before discussing potential solutions to food insecurity on campus, is there anything about the issue that perhaps we haven't discussed, Maggie? Any needs or priorities that you think we should consider first?
I don't really think so. I think the biggest thing was looking at how COVID affected the food pantry. We did see that we were getting a lot more food, but less people were coming. So that's something that we just have to deal with on our end. But I just think that getting the word out is the biggest thing really for us.
So when we talk about solutions, so how do we better address food insecurity on campus? You're saying that it would probably be help, addressing stigma, getting the word out about the pantry. It's not necessarily that you need access to more food. Exactly.
I feel like in the past, so I volunteered pre-COVID. I wasn't in this role, but I was there pretty much every week. And then from that to now, it's just completely different. In the amount of people, we have a lot less people coming. We also no longer have as big of an international student population, and a lot of people were international students. So I think that kind of hurt us because the people that worked at the International Center were making sure that we were our name was being talked about and everything, so that they knew that they could come and get food. I just think that there's a lack of communication on the availability of food, and I think that stigma is a huge thing. Some people don't want to come and get food, or they think, oh, I don't really think I need to go, even though they need food. So I know people that personally who I'm like, just come get food. It's free for students. Anybody can come, just come get food. We have lots of food. But they're like, I don't think it's for me, even though we've talked about, grocery shopping, all that. So yes, just getting the word out, which it's just so hard. We've tried yard signs on campus, which I thought would work really well, but it didn't necessarily make that big of a difference. We have a banner on an online banner for Marshall's homepage. When you log on as a student, it's always on there with the hours and the location. I do think that our location it's a great location, but it's a little bit discreet personally. If you didn't know it was there, then you don't know where it is. So you have to if I would tell my friends, I would have to give them more of a descriptive way, like a GPS pretty much. Okay, you need to turn here and make sure that it's this building, not this building type of thing. Because we're right off campus, but we're kind of on campus, if that makes sense. But yeah, I just think getting the word out is really our best option at this point, because we have plenty of food. It's just a matter of getting it to people. So if someone were to try and initiate a food pantry on their college or university, you would say an accessible location is paramount or a priority to starting? Yes, I would. So the pantry has been in a few different locations. So at first it was in the student center, which a lot of people didn't go to because they thought it was too out in the open. And then it moved down to Pullman, which is where the dietetics department is. And nobody really used it because I was way out of the way, which I can understand that because you have to ride the bus or walk. And then it moved to where it is now, which I think it could be a great location if there was more signs or something. we were trying to get into it, and then I ended up graduating, and it was a lot. But yes, definitely have a very accessible location.
But also discreet.
Yes, accessible yet discreet, for sure.
So here's a question. What solutions or ideas do you have to better address food insecurity on campus? We've talked about a lot of things. Do you have any additional ones that we haven't touched on?
Oof. I think that making sure that the higher ups on campus know about the issue of food insecurity, because if they don't know, then how is it suspected that younger, like the people below them know? I think because it's just important so that they know, then they can talk about it within the university. But yeah.
It's important. So you're saying administration. And again, if this whole issue was brought to my attention by the West Virginia, the Commission on Higher Education.
Mhm.
And so they knew that the governing bodies of students across the state had made it a priority, and yet administrators don't realize how much of an issue it is. So I think that's a really important point. I'd love to bounce this idea off of you and see what you think. There's a bill that hasn't been introduced, but it's been introduced, but it hasn't made it on an agenda yet, that would give funding to kind of create a network and coordinate food pantries across universities and college campuses across the state. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it could potentially be a great idea, but I also think it would be a little bit challenging, just because there's not a lot of campuses close to one another. Like, I know I'm from the Morgantown area. I'm from like 30 minutes south. So I know like WVU, Fairmont State, they're kind of close, but then we have Huntington, like Marshall, Mount West, West Virginia State is close to us. But I think that it wouldn't necessarily be like sharing food. I also know that that's very hard, being a part of the food bank, because there's like rules you have to follow. But maybe like for sharing recipes or ideas of advertising, stuff like that. I think that would be beneficial, so that you can get more than just one college's view on it, or one area, so that I could talk to whoever at WVU and say, okay, how do you advertise yours? Or how do you do this, so that we could get new ideas? Because I know that as the student director at Marshall, it was hard because it was pretty much just me. I had volunteers, but it wasn't like I had a board to be able to discuss things with. It was pretty much just me, and of course Kelli. But it wasn't as easy to come up with ideas because it was just by myself. It wasn't like a governing body, pretty much.
Gotcha. Well, I think it's a great bill. I'm not sure it's going to move this year, but I'm glad that it's been introduced, and maybe in the next couple of years we'll be able to generate more of a conversation around this issue. Andrea, we'll turn to you one more time. You have any questions or comments online?
We don't have any at this time, but really enjoyed this session. Thank you, Maggie.
Yes.
Thanks, Andrea. So last question, if people want to support your food pantry or the work you're doing to address hunger at Marshall University, what can they do?
So the easiest way, if you wanted to donate, would be to go to our website, which is www.marshall.edu/food-pantry. There's a donate button, and that if you click that, you'll go directly. The money that you donate would go directly to the food pantry, so it's not like it just goes to Marshall and they distribute it how they want to. It will go directly to the food pantry. If you're in the area, you are more than welcome to donate food items to the pantry, or gift cards, money, whatever you would prefer. In order to donate directly to the pantry, I would get in touch with Kelli Williams for the hours, and she can give you the information of the current director, just because we're not open all the time. We're open 2 days a week. So we want to make sure that we accommodate for people that can't come during the hours that we're open. I know that when I was there, I met with people outside of hours just because they couldn't come. But yeah, definitely donating on the website.
Great. Well, we will have those links so people can connect on both our Facebook comment section and on our YouTube channel. And with that, Maggie, thanks so much for joining us today. And to Kelli, for your time and expertise. I learned a lot. I hope others have too. If some people missed the discussion, or you know someone who may be interested in this conversation, we'll have this video posted on YouTube tomorrow. So you'll find the link here on our Facebook page. So thanks again. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks for those who watched for joining us. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.